Hi, welcome to Independent Green Party, Green TV. I'm Kerry Campbell, Independent Green Party.
Hi, I'm Brooklyn Kinley with the Independent Green Party. Independent Green Party, Green TV focus is Independent Green Party candidates for local, state, and federal office.
Green Party, Green TV reports on positive Green Party, Green New Deal, eco-jobs for the economy.
Green Party solar jobs, wind jobs, geothermal jobs.
Green Party insulation jobs, conservation jobs, weatherization jobs.
Green Party rail jobs, building walkable, bikeable, pedestrian, and rail-friendly communities.
Green Party, Green TV is about positive Green Party, Green New Deal solutions.
Independent Green Party local, state, federal, and presidential candidates offer positive eco-solutions. Eco-capitalism's prices must tell the environmental truth. A green industrial revolution means jobs, and we need to cut taxpayer subsidies to zero for fossil fuels, big oil, big auto.
Well, what happened to their health was, first their obesity rates went down by 50%. Their death rates from diabetes went down 50%, basically overnight, and their death rates from heart attacks and strokes went down 25 to 35%. So they're basically having a health miracle, and how much did they spend on it? $0. They had an absolute health transformation for nothing, simply from greening their economy. So it makes the point that the health payoffs here are absolutely incredible. They did that with $0 with $3 trillion a year. We're actually getting sicker, and our survival rates are going down and things like that. So that's how much benefit there is here. This is a win-win all around. And I'll name a couple other things that we can also accomplish. We can enact healthcare as a human right through a Medicare for all system. Everybody in, nobody out, you're covered head to toe, cradle to grave. And the costs go way down because you take out this massive, wasteful health insurance bureaucracy. So we can do that. We can revitalize public education and start fully funding our schools and ensure that kids come to school ready to learn. That is that is healthy and nourished so they can be educated. And free from poverty, because poverty, is the biggest obstacle to education out there. And our system has been focusing on high-stakes testing, when they should have been looking at poverty that prevents kids from learning in the first place. And we can obviously end the high-stakes testing, which is harmful to challenged learners in the first place and is used as an excuse for closing and privatizing our schools and for bashing teachers and unions. So we can put an end to that and start teaching again to the whole student for lifetime learning and nurturing the creative thinking and the independent spirits, which are really essential to the cause of democracy. A couple other things to mention. We can create a welcoming path to citizenship for undocumented Americans, which is critical to the diversity and vitality of our communities, our economy, and our culture. And we can halt the shameful night raids, the detentions, and the deportations. Instead, how about we stop causing the migrant crisis in the first place by repealing the predatory policies that are driving this migrant crisis? And that's everything from NAFTA, which put millions of farmers and workers out of business south of the US border. That's the war on drugs, where basically we've caused a crisis in Mexico that has killed 100,000 people in the last, 6 years, something like that alone. It's absolutely incredible. And then there's the CIA-supported coups, the US military invasions, and the US-trained death squads, which have done so much to create the absolute crisis where warlords, where gang wars prevail in the 3 countries in Central America that have been the real source of the biggest streams of migrants. That is Honduras and Ecuador and Guatemala, all countries where the US invaded and destroyed their democracies. So, you know, when people complain about the migrant crisis, okay, you don't like it, stop causing it. We need to do that, you know, for all kinds of reasons, but not the least of which is that, you know, the migrant crisis, especially what is tearing Europe apart right now at the seams, which again is coming from the failed states that the US really instigated. We've got to stop causing this. You know, this is a problem. You can't put Band-Aids on it. You have to actually cure the disease at its basis, and that is for us to stop these very misguided, harmful, predatory policies. We can end the racist violence in policing, in courts, and in our prison system, as well as in the broader economy. And we can start by ensuring that there are police review boards, that is, citizens that review the behavior of the police, and also the hiring of the police chiefs and so on. And the reason for having these boards is that then communities can be in control of their police instead of the other way around. And we need full-time investigators so that every case of death or serious injury in the custody of police is investigated. And to end the racism in our prison system and beyond and on the streets of our communities, we need to end the racist war on drugs and treat substance abuse as a health issue, not as a criminal issue, and discharge from the prisons the tens of thousands, I think it's actually 100,000 and more, who nonviolent drug offenders who should not be locked up in the first place. And then finally, on foreign policy, we need to go back to the drawing boards and have a foreign policy that's based on international law, on human rights, and on diplomacy, not on total global economic and military domination, because as we've seen, that policy is incredibly catastrophic. If you look at the costs, it has actually cost the US $6 trillion since the first invasion of Afghanistan. So over about 15 years, it's cost us $6 trillion, which comes down to a mere sum of $75,000 per household, which is absolutely staggering. If people knew about that, they would have a very different approach to entering into these wars. Not only the cost in dollars, but over a million people have been killed in Iraq alone, which is not exactly winning the US, the hearts and minds of people in the Middle East. And tens of thousands of US soldiers that have been killed and maimed. And what do we have to show for it? Failed states, worse terrorist threats, whether you're looking at Taliban or Al-Qaeda or now newly created ISIS, they are all far worse than they were, or they didn't exist at all before we started this mess. So more of the same is not going to help. What we clearly need to do, and one other effect of all of this has been the migrant crisis, of course, which is tearing not only Europe apart, but countries in the Middle East as well. This is absolutely devastating. So more of the same is not the answer. What more resources could we put into this than we have already? We've totally gone to the mat for the past 15 years. And it only gets worse. This is a cycle of violence that you can certainly trace back to the war in Afghanistan in the 1970s, where the US and the Saudis, in all of our wisdom, first began to create international jihadism. How did we do that? By funding the mujahideen, by helping them recruit, and by arming them, and helping to ensure that they were trained. We actually created this international jihadism as part of fighting the Russians in Afghanistan in the 1970s. And that's also where Al-Qaeda originated. So with each cycle of violence, this so-called terrorist threat only gets worse. But remember, we're funding it, indirectly at least. The Saudis are funding it, and we're helping to, and we're enabling the Saudis certainly by arming them with $100 billion worth of arms over the past less than 10 years alone. And from the Saudis, you know, the Saudis make no bones about it that they are arming what they call moderate terrorists. But, you know, terrorists don't don't sign up and become card-carrying members of specific organizations. You know, this is a constant flux between warlords and freedom fighters and resistance against drones and religious extremists. And they are shape-shifting all the time. So it's not okay to be calling certain of them, like, you know, our policy in Afghanistan was to recruit warlords, you know, so they were on your side one day, and then they switched over with all the arms and the training and the funding that we gave them, you know. Arming warlords, whether they're terrorists or not, you know, is no way to conduct a foreign policy. This is not.
The biggest way people give up power is by not knowing that we have it to start with. Well, we've got it, and we're going to use it. And it doesn't come from the big corporate political parties that are bought and paid for by Wall Street. Their choices are not our choices. Their candidates are not our candidates. Their economy is not our economy. Their government is not our government. Their prisons are not our prisons. Their police are not our police. And their endless wars are not our wars. And their recovery for the few is not our recovery. The 1% is quaking in their boots because we're waking up to the fact that we have the power and we're going to use it. We have the power to make the minimum wage a living wage. We have the power to turn the tide on climate change. We have the power to create a welcoming path to citizenship. We have the power to end the racist war on drugs. It's in our hands. Together, we can build a world that puts people and the planet and peace over profit. That's in our hands. Our power to create this new world. It's not in our hopes. It's not in our dreams. It's in our hands. Thank you.
I'm Daryl Cherney, and I'm running for president. I'm taking all the money out of politics. We're not accepting any donations at all. I'm going to run my entire campaign off of YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, social media. I want to teach young people that there's another way you can do politics in this country. Time is running out, and we need somebody who knows that. I'm tired of war. I'm tired of us being divided and conquered, and it breaks my heart every time I see the bombs falling. The climate is changing. The ice caps are melting. The rivers are rising. The hurricanes are devastating us. But I also think there's something we can do about it. If there's 7 billion people on this planet, there are 7 billion jobs fixing the damage we've done. I have a 3.5-year-old daughter, so I think I can handle Congress. I'm Daryl Cherney, and the future is in our hearts.
What creates a stable world? You know, we need to get out of the business of needing to exploit countries and to install dictatorships in order to assure the supply of oil or the trade routes along which that oil will pass. So that's how we solve the problem here. So what we're calling for actually is a peace offensive, not to just throw up our hands and walk away, but actually to stop doing the damage that's creating these wars to start with. So we're calling for a peace offensive to stop ISIS in its tracks and to end the wars for oil. And specifically, that means a weapons embargo to the Middle East, where we are supplying weapons basically to all sides, which benefits the war profiteers, but it doesn't create a world that the rest of us can live in. And we call for freezing the bank accounts of those countries who are actually funding this. We've been railing against the Saudis ever since 9/11, where it's well known that the Saudis were funding at least the vast majority of the 9/11 bombers and their training and so on. So for a long time we've been talking about having the Saudis, quote, clean up their act And as recently as 2009, Hillary Clinton, in one of her State Department cables, identified the Saudis as still, hands down, the major funder of terrorist organizations worldwide. So how about we start using our influence for good here and saying, well, if you're not going to clean up your act, we're going to actually freeze your bank accounts. We do that to other countries we call terrorists. Isn't it about time to do it to the biggest funder and weapons supplier of terrorism worldwide? So we're saying there is a way we can actually fix this problem, but it's not by dropping more bombs and firing more bullets into it, or using more drones, which kill 9 innocent people for each intended target, many of whom are innocent as well. So more of the same isn't going to do it. There is a way forward here. This is the world that we can create, a world based on democracy, justice, and human rights, a world that works for all of us. But it's a world that's outside of corporate-sponsored politics, that's funded by the predatory banks and the fossil fuel giants and the war profiteers. So we're saying it's time for a politics of courage. It's time to stand up and vote for our deeply held beliefs and not against what we fear the most. Because that politics of fear has delivered everything we were afraid of. All the reasons that you were told, or you are told, that you need to vote for the lesser evil, you got to vote strategically, don't throw your vote away on something that would really work. You know, vote for a lesser evil because, you know, why? Well, back in 2012 and in 2008, it's because you didn't want more Wall Street bailouts, you didn't want the offshoring of our jobs, you know, and who's beating the drum for that? You know, it's Obama and the Democratic Party leadership that want the next NAFTA, the TPP, or the TTIP, you know, whichever side of the ocean you happen to, whichever ocean you have to be on. But, you know, they're still driving these outrageous trade agreements. That's coming from the Democrats, like, you know, in the same way that NAFTA was signed by Bill Clinton way back when. You know, we were supposed to vote for the lesser evil because you didn't want more of that, or because you didn't want the massive expansion of our wars, the war on immigrants, the attack on our civil liberties. But that's what we've gotten by the droves. So the politics of fear has basically delivered everything that we were afraid of. Because in signing up to that politics of fear, we allow ourselves to be silenced and to let the lesser evil political party speak for us. But silence is not an effective political strategy. And in fact, the lesser evil just paves the way to the greater evil, because people don't come out and vote for what they're against. They're motivated to come out and vote for what they're for. Otherwise, they just stay home. And we've seen states flip from blue to red. We saw Congress flip from blue to red after Obama was elected, and he didn't really support what people were expecting of him. So out of outrage and disappointment and the incredible stress that people are under now, you know, people will they will start abandoning the Democratic Party or just not coming out to vote for it at all, which has been the greater problem. 2014 was a record turnout since the Second World War. So, bottom line is democracy doesn't happen in a vacuum. It needs voices and values, not silence and fear. It needs a moral compass, and we have to be that moral compass. The clock is ticking. This is our Hail Mary moment. It's time to reject the lesser evil and stand up and fight for the greater good, like our lives depend on it, because they do. And together we can build a world that works for all of us, that puts people, planet, and peace over profit. And the power to create that world is not just in our hopes, it's not just in our dreams. Right here and right now, it's in our hands. Thank you for making it so.
Well, thank you very much for that, Jill. As usual, I will start off with a few questions of my own before opening up to the audience for some of your questions. So if we may go back to the start of your political career, you often said you never planned going into politics, and you've said, when I was tricked to run into running for the governor of Massachusetts. Could you run us through how you were initially approached to run and kind of what the reaction was for someone who was a graduate of Harvard Medical School, of course?
Yes, right, but don't hold it against me, please. I was working as a medical doctor and as a mother, observing in my communities as well as in my clinic. I was working at a college clinic at the time. I was just very disturbed by what I was seeing with these new epidemics of cancer and learning disabilities and asthma and diabetes and all these things that we didn't used to have, especially not in young people. And so I became involved in efforts of communities to clean up their air, to clean up their toxic waste sites, clean up their coal plants, et cetera, and to try to create jobs in clean areas of the economy that would be good for jobs, good for workers, good for the community, and good for our health. And I found over and over again that the legislature would keep obstructing us. And I found it extremely frustrating and disturbing that we were having these really serious health problems where there were solutions that were affordable and available, but because they flew in the face of powerful special interests, they couldn't move forward. And so at that point, I joined a coalition to get money out of politics, and we actually succeeded, and we passed this referendum, the Clean Elections Referendum, to create public financing in Massachusetts. And then the Democratic Party, which held 85% of the votes in the legislature, repealed that law. And so for me, that was just the final straw. And I was trying to figure out, so what to do now, basically. And then the Green Party came to me and said, well, why don't you just keep doing what you're doing, sort of working on behalf of communities and health and the environment, but just call it a political campaign. And that's why I say I was tricked into running for office, because that's not all you do when you run for office. You also do other things too. But that's how I got lured into it. And once I got into it, I just discovered that there was such a hunger for a clean kind of politics, and for candidates who were not, shall we say, just oozing with special interest money. That people could smell a rat, and they could also smell if you weren't a rat. And it just felt like there was so much hunger for a real, honest conversation that it was extremely exhilarating, and it felt like, oh my God, we could actually get somewhere with this. And if I can just tell you one last thing, because this is why I stayed with it. And I might not have if I felt like we weren't actually moving forward, but we fought our way into a debate, into a televised debate in that governor's race, because people were really, horrified listening to this mockery of democracy, which our debates actually are. So there were huge mobs that were turning out and were just screaming to open up the debates. So I was allowed into a debate, and inside that debate hall, the ideas that I put forward, like up there, were basically dismissed. They were considered just too fringe to even bother rebutting or engaging. So they weren't debated or discussed at all. And I was sort of feeling like, oh well, I tried, as we left the TV studio. So there was no live audience. It was just the candidates and the moderator. And when we walked out, I was mobbed by the press, and the press told me that I had won the debate on the instant online viewer poll. And I felt like, oh my God, the light just went on, in front of my eyes, that this is a scam. They're pretending that the public doesn't agree with us. The public actually does agree with us, that this special interests are really, they are the odd man out here. And the public interest really is our basic values. And at that point, I realized, oh my God, we don't have to change people's minds. History has already changed people's minds. The climate and the economy has changed people's minds. All we have to do is figure out how to organize the power that this movement has. I think the political system really sucks right now,
And just getting the person with the right chromosomes, with 2 X chromosomes, is not the solution. Hillary's agenda is not a woman's agenda. That's right. I mean, this is reality. Our fate is together, We are on this small boat, and that boat is not doing so well. Just putting a token woman into the White House is not going to do it, particularly when that token woman comes with the whole history of working for Walmart, whose agenda could be more harmful to the cause of women and children than Walmart, that forces their employees onto public assistance and food support. A candidate who's been behind closed doors with Goldman Sachs and receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars in speakers' fees, and who won't release the content of those speeches. The candidate who has yet to find a war that she didn't love, who led the charge on Libya, who supported the war in Iraq and only recanted on that, like a decade later or so. This is not what women need for the way forward, and it's not what society needs. We need a real public interest agenda with a public interest party. That's what my campaign is all about.
Be part of the positive solution. The Independent Green Party and Green Party recruits candidates for local, state, and federal offices across the U.S. Contact the Independent Green Party through their webpage at www.votejoinrun.us.
In Virginia, people can contact the Independent Green Party at 703-351-1235. Email the Independent Green Party State Chairman, Joe Otto, at usrepublic@aol.com. And check out the Independent Green's YouTube channel, or contact the Independent Green Party on the Independent Green Party Facebook page.
That's this edition of Independent Green Party Green TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brooklyn Kinlay, Independent Green Party.
I'm Kerry Campbell, Independent Green Party. See you again next time on Green Party Green TV.